Awesome. Okay. She has been obsessed with understanding how Google determines and rewards quality in websites since 2008. She teaches on the Quality Raters Guidelines, link quality, Google penalties, and Google's changing algorithms. Please give a warm welcome to Dr. Marie Haynes. Love in the chat for.
Thank you.
Let's go. That's right. I love to see it. And we have the founder of Backlinko and the CEO of Exploding Topics, the top resource to uncover high growth keywords before they start trending. His weekly email newsletter is read by over 173,000 SEO professionals and marketers. Show some love for our very own Brian Dean. I wish I had one of those like air horns, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, the way that this session is going to go, I'm going to start with some high-level questions. We're talking about navigating Google's algorithm today. So we'll start with some high-level questions. We're going to get into some more tactical stuff, and then we will cover some audience questions at the end. Does that sound good?
Sounds great. Let's do it.
I love it. All right. Well, we can't start a navigating Google's algorithm chat without talking about this new Google helpful content update. How should we be thinking about it? Is it helpful? Marie, why don't you take us away?
Sure. So Google made a big deal about this update. I mean, they reached out to several SEOs, including myself, before the update happened to say, like, this is going to be a big deal. And then when it happened, it seemed like very little actually happened. Now, since then, we've seen a number of sites that have been negatively affected by this update. But the sites affected, the scale of the update has not been as large as most SEOs expected. I'm sure we'll get into this, but I think we have a lot more to come to see with the helpful content update. I'm curious, Brian, whether you've seen sites strongly affected. I've seen just a few.
Yeah, I haven't seen much. Like you said, Marie, it was a lot of sizzle, not a lot of steak with this update. It was, in my opinion, a PR more than anything, which I think the named updates have been. It's a pattern of Panda and Penguin to improve the results, search results, but also to send sort of a message that we're not messing around anymore when it comes to either with Panda, mass-produced sort of low-quality, thin content, with Penguin, with shady link building, and now I think with AI-produced content was the main sort of message they wanted to get across, that they're not for it. And that what really confirmed that for me was that the update kind of had a slogan, like for humans by humans. And for me, that was like, it's weird to have an update have like a slogan and a logo and all this stuff, which suggested to me it was going to be more of a PR thing than an actual update. But even I was surprised at how little it seemed to impact the search results. It was basically nothing. Like they announced it's starting to roll out. It rolled out and it's done. And people were like, what's that? But like you said, Marie, there are sort of aftershocks that might be happening. But then the difficult part then is that it's hard to tie it directly to this update because there's other updates happening all the time. So to me, it was more of a PR thing. That's why they reached out to these SEOs beforehand and warned them. Note that they didn't do that with a lot of previous updates. They just rolled them out after the fact, announced it. So not to be a conspiracy theorist or anything, but to me, it's a real update. I'm sure they rolled something out that attempted to improve the search results, but I think it was more of a warning that they're worried about how AI content is being produced at obviously mass scale.
Yeah, I think I can jump in there too and just add that the way that Google described it, they said the helpful content update is introducing a new classifier. It's almost like a new way that they can identify low quality content. And they hinted that it will get stronger as time goes by. So I really think that Google introduced a new way to assess quality. And initially, the sites that were affected were very large AI producing sites that had content that, maybe would do well in old search engines. But when a human reads it, it's very obvious to us that it's not human written. And then when we had shortly after, so the helpful content update finished rolling out, I believe it was September 9th. it was a Friday. And then on the Monday, Google launched the core update. And I believe, I can't say this for sure, but I think that a lot of the sites that had the classifier that are saying, okay, here's some unhelpful content on this site, they weren't actually impacted until the date of the core update. So I think all of these updates are sort of intertwined and just more of Google's way of determining which content actually is high quality.
Okay, so interesting. So you're saying that actually the helpful content update is not really all that helpful. It's more of a signal that, hey, this is a direction that we want to move towards, where things like AI written content will be more penalized, or is it less about like who wrote the content and more the sort of authority and the topicality of the content itself?
Yeah, it's less about who wrote it, more about how helpful. I mean, that sounds kind of obvious to say, but how helpful the content actually is. So, one of the sites that I'm soon about to jump into an investigation on is a site that is a massive aggregator of a particular type of product, and much of their content is auto-generated, and so that's part of what the helpful content update goes after. But it's really important to note that Google said it's a machine learned algorithm, which they haven't said that a lot in the past. They haven't admitted to using machine learning to actually determine how to weight an algorithm. And they told us that it's going to learn as they go along. We're going to have more of these updates, and so I can't see that Google did this and made such a big deal about it, for it to be just nothing. I think we're going to see that it gets stronger and stronger as the months go by.
Is that what you're seeing as well, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. I'm seeing what Marie. I 100% agree with Marie. It's just hard to predict how much it's going to impact things, and even if there is a big shuffle, unless Google comes out and says that was helpful content update 2.0, like they did with Penguin, it's going to be difficult to tie it back. That's a tricky part of Maria's job, and it's amazing the work she does, because it's really hard to, when a site drops. I get this question a lot all the time. My site dropped, why? Even if I had access to Google Analytics, Google Search Console, everything, even then it's really hard to determine what happens. But if you're just from the outside looking in, it's really difficult it's almost impossible to figure out whether it was something on your site, whether it was an update, and even then to tie it to a specific update. And sort of at the end of the day, unless your site is doing sort of a niche thing, I'm not calling it bad. Like if you're using like your aggregator site that Marie's client, I'm sure it's not shady. They're not trying to like do something. There's just the way the site is designed. And I'm sure when users land on the page, it actually is helpful in a way. So it's not necessarily that aggregators are bad or AI content is even bad inherently. It's just that they're trying to always improve the algorithm, but usually they do it a little bit low key, and they haven't done named updates. This is why I'm really kind of honing in on that. For me, that's a big deal. Like they had Penguin, they had Panda, they had Penguin, they had before that they had Flora and all these other updates. Then they had the product reviews update, but all the updates since then have either been like generic core updates, or we name them like Medic or things like that. So the fact that they had a whole campaign around this, out to SEOs, it spoke to me as it's more about sending a message than the update itself, although the update could be significant over time, like Marie said. How significant, it's impossible to say. I bet a Google engineer couldn't even tell you, because it's machine learning. So it depends how good it is at detecting this stuff, because a lot of AI content is, especially if it's edited well, it's a little difficult to discern whether a human wrote it or not. It still might be low quality, and it usually is, but it's harder to determine whether a human wrote it. And the fact that it was all about human writing humans by humans for humans makes me think they don't want that. And I can understand why, because AI content is the worst of the regurgitation of what already happens in the search results so much, where you have a freelance writer and you assign them something and they just have like 5 tabs open on their browser, and they just take what's in, they regurgitate it, remix it, and then spit it out on the page. That's already bad, but this is doing it at scale, and there's no editorial process at all. It's just sort of understanding what's already out there. So I can understand why Google would want to sort of nip this in the bud, and I think that's what they're doing, because AI content's still relatively new, and I think they want to send a message that, look, if you're trying to do this stuff, it's not going to work. Whether or not they'll be able to ever figure it out, I don't know. And it looked like they weren't able to on the first go, at least. But it's definitely something to watch.
One of the things that Bernard Huang had shared in an earlier session today was that he sees the role of AI tools being actually advantageous in areas where things that people agree on, where it's effectively, like facts and more like descriptive type of thing, because it's just remixing what's already there versus it struggles with things like unique perspectives. Would you agree with that? Would you add some nuance to it, Brian?
Oh, I agree 100% because that's all it can do. AI at this point can't create anything. It can create new things, like even Dolly. Yes, it's creating new things, but it's closely based on millions of things that are out there. In a way, not to get philosophical, in a way that's not that different than how humans create stuff. Like we're all just taking what's out there and remixing it, but theirs is a little more direct, and there isn't that spark. Hard to put your finger out, but there's a certain spark when a human creates something that's not there with AI, especially with AI writing. Like AI writing is the worst of that. Like I said, it's just literally regurgitating what already exists. It's not adding any unique perspective because the AI doesn't have any perspective. They've never experienced anything. So when you're reading something like one of Marie's case studies where she breaks down a site and how it got hit by an update and how she helped them recover, it's not just about what happened. She's also drawing her years of experience of looking at this. This reminds me of another site that happened, this happened, this happened. And AI can't do that. So that's the missing link that AI will always lack, is that real world experience. It doesn't have any experiences to draw on. And it's not, I'm not talking about fiction writing or writing a novel. Even when you're writing about technical stuff, coding or whatever, you can just tell right away if someone really knows what they're talking about, they've experienced it, or if they're regurgitating. And with AI, it's 10 times easier to notice that.
It's fascinating to, sorry to interrupt.
No, go for it.
It's fascinating to see how the questions that Google gives us, like Brian mentioned, the Panda questions, which they gave us back in 2011, a long time ago, and the core update questions, the product review questions, they all talk about firsthand expertise being important. And that's something that I've really seen with a lot of the recent updates. Some of the recent product reviews updates, you can clearly see that the pages that were demoted in these updates were ones where maybe they, the site owners were trying to demonstrate their expertise. I see people saying like, oh, I've been gardening for 14 years, but there's no external evidence of firsthand expertise. And, so I think that Google really wants to promote people who truly know what they're talking about, and, we keep harping about AI written content. The helpful content update wasn't completely about AI. I think a lot of AI content is what is initially hit by it. But that's what's lacking with a lot of AI content is it can write the facts very well about a topic, but when it comes to adding that element of firsthand expertise, that's always going to be necessary in order to rank for important queries.
Yeah, and I think even for sorry, Joe.
Oh, no worries. Last word on this topic. Go for it,
last
Brian.
word. Like with my new company, Exploring Topics, it's interesting because we don't write about it's all about trends and data and statistics and stuff. So there really isn't a lot of unique perspective. We try to actually shy away from that in a way. Like there's no firsthand. We don't use we have a policy. We don't even use pronouns because we want it to be very like objective. So there's no they, you, which is like usually in sort of content writing, you want it to be sort of informal. This is a little bit more like McKinsey style. So, but the interesting thing is I'm always thinking of that. How do I make it unique, have a unique perspective without that person's perspective? Because we have a team of writers. But what we've really honed in on is that another thing AI isn't good at is aggregating like data and synthesizing stuff. They can regurgitate, but there's a big difference between that and synthesizing. Synthesizing is like, okay, what are the biggest trends in banking right now? You have to sort of analyze the landscape, see what's there, and add your own perspective because there's always going to be some editorialization there. What the AI will do will just take some other articles that are about 7 banking trends and just put them in a washing machine and take them out. What we're doing with the writers is they're market researchers who can understand the space at a high level and write about them with all backed by data. So there's tons of data and facts. AI could do that second part, but they couldn't really create new ideas on top of what's happening or identify a trend that hasn't been talked about a lot already. And that's, like Marie said, that's what Google wants. They want the unique perspective. So if writing about a technical topic, it doesn't have to be like, I did this thing, because we've written tons of posts and our traffic is growing. You just have to have a unique perspective of some kind. And I think that's Google is somehow, Marie, able to suss that out. Like you said, with the product reviews update, they can tell if you tried that spade that you're writing a review on, or you didn't. And sometimes, and as a human, it's usually pretty obvious, but it's kind of amazing they can do that with an algorithm.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell me like a specific example of where you've been able to elevate the content with that, like what may be more of a, I guess, factual perspective, but adding in that unique lens? Like what does that really look like in practice?
In practice, it's basic.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Marie.
No, you go.
I was listening. In practice, it's kind of like taking disparate data points and saying, oh, maybe this is actually, these are connected and this is a trend. So for example, we have a lot of food and beverage trends. We have a lot of posts on that, and supplements and health and things like that. And there's a lot of interesting trends that they sort of tie together that aren't necessarily obvious. Like, for example, people want like plant-based supplements, and they also want plant-based meat, and they want plant-based everything. So that's a trend that would tie these things together. So if you're looking at like high-level food and beverage trends, you have to take a step back and sort of see the landscape and say, okay, it's not just plant-based diets people want. People are infusing that in everything. Or another example is like THC. THC is getting infused in food and beverage stuff. That's something that AI wouldn't be able to identify. They could tell you THC stands for this. It's, you know, it helps with this. It's bad because of this. It's legal in whatever states. Like they could just riddle off facts. But what they couldn't do is say, a big trend right now is THC infused beverages, because this stat shows it's growing. This data point shows it's growing, and we aggregate those together, and a human is able to make those sort of connections.
I think there are two ways that Google can assess whether something is written with firsthand expertise. So one, I mean, we talk all the time about this concept of EAT, expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. And it's so much more than just a score. And so Google has all sorts of metrics that they can look at to determine, does this person actually, or the person or the brand actually have the authority, the expertise to write on this topic. And certain topics are going to need more authority than others. So if I am querying, a new medication that I'm put on, it's very important that that comes from an authoritative source. And so EAT, not necessarily having a doctor write it, but the website being known as a trusted authority on these topics is one element of expertise. The other thing is that I can't prove this, but I do believe that Google's algorithms can determine when content is expert written just by the types of content that are there. And so one example would be a client that we had that's a doctor in a certain one particular area, and he competes against the big players like Healthline and WebMD for his queries. And when he writes about his topics, he's adding things that he sees in his practice, which if you took this to a content writer, they can aggregate, everything you need to know about this medical condition, and it can be the most accurate piece of content out there. But with the doctor adding, well, here's what I've seen, and when we go on this medication, here's what my patients tend to see. It's that type of information that I really believe that Google's algorithms are starting to recognize, yes, this is closely associated to this topic, and it's relevant to what users want to see for it. And there will be vague things that we can't even measure where Google recognizes when a user needs that level of expertise. So it's very complicated. I see people saying, well, my content is getting beaten by somebody who doesn't even have author bios, when maybe that's not what a searcher would expect for that type of content. And so I think a lot of the changes that we've seen recently have been Google better understanding the intent of the searcher and what level of authenticity and expertise is needed in the content.
Yeah, that's
Absolutely.
a really good point, Marie. The author bio thing, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because people think that's some sort of magical thing, like, oh, that's what I was missing, an author bio. And the author bio, I mean, and especially now in the health space, it's impossible to really tell the impact of having a doctor write it, a doctor review it, because everyone's doing it. So there's no control group anymore. And even the site like that got hit with the medic update, Dr. Axe. Okay, maybe I don't know a lot about the guy, but he was a doctor and they got destroyed. So he was a doctor writing stuff. Like I said, I don't know if he's good about it or otherwise, but he got hit with the update. So it's not as simple as having that. Plus you could just make it up. Like, okay, I have Elon Musk wrote an article for Exploring Topic. Like I could just put that as an author bio. Like it doesn't mean anything. It's something that is easy to just put there, but I don't think it sends a message to Google as much. Like Marie said, it's more the searcher would want to see that to say, oh, this is written or reviewed by a doctor, dietitian, vet, whatever. And Healthline does a great job at that because every piece is reviewed and obviously very well referenced. And that's one of the reasons they just absolutely dominate the search results in the health space. So yeah, when it comes to EAT, I think an underrated part of it is authority with links to the site, because that's another huge factor that Google continues to rely on, just because it's so good. Because anyone can do an author bio, but it's really hard to get a link from like Yale, Tufts, Harvard, Brown. It's really hard to do that. You have to be a real authority to do it. So I can see why Google would incorporate that into their EAT as opposed to just surface level stuff. That the quality, a big reason that this thing gets big is because those quality rater guidelines. But those raters are just looking at the surface level stuff. They don't have access to the algorithm. They don't have access to the links points to the page. They just do some cursory research, and it's basically to make sure that they didn't do something really bad. The algorithm is totally off, in my opinion. So yeah, the author bio, if you're in the health space, obviously it's not going to hurt you, but it's really not going to make a big difference. You have a doctor review your content as opposed to not, in my opinion. If you have a doctor really review it, then the content itself will be better, and then that will help your rankings. But the bio doesn't really make a difference, in my opinion.
I should add here that very quickly,
the last word on this topic.
We have had clients that have improved, that we think the improvement was because of adding author bios, but it wasn't the author bio that did it. It was the fact that they actually got doctors in to legitimately review the content and provide good references and whatnot. So I wouldn't discount author bios, but I think a lot of people think that that's all EAT is, when it's just a component of making your page more trustworthy.
Let me ask you, Marie, we're talking about how search intent is mattering more and more. The type of result that best matches your query maybe a shorter response matches a query and will be ranked higher in a certain situation versus, long form editorial content. Just zooming out a little bit, where's search going? Google made a big PR move with this helpful content update, but like, what direction is search moving towards in the next 5 years?
I harp too much on this, but Google's blog post on core updates is something that's very, very important. And that's the one where they list 20 questions. It's almost the same as the Panda questions. And when we first had those questions, we would say, well, it's kind of wishful thinking, but like, how could Google write an algorithm to actually measure these things that are in the questions? When they gave us the Panda announcement, they actually said these questions give you some insight into how we write algorithms to rank websites. And recently I was speaking with Alan Kent from Google, who works in the product reviews algorithm department. And I was surprised that he actually confirmed this to me, that Google uses machine learning to try to find which content matches those questions. So we don't know exactly how it's used, but the idea is that Google can look at those questions. So, is it firsthand expertise? Would you give your credit card to this site? Those types of questions. And I thoroughly believe that the information from the quality raters now is used to provide Google with good and bad results. So, here's a page that, according to the quality raters guidelines, would be considered high quality. Here's one that would be low quality. And then Google can use those in their machine learning algorithms to figure out what the weights are to produce the ranking system. So what I'm saying by this is that I think that we're seeing a shift. PageRank and links as we know it to prop up rankings is still important, but I feel like as Google gets more semantic capabilities, more capabilities to understand language, to understand which factors are important to users, that they're going to rely more on those and less on links as a ranking factor. Now, links, like Brian said, are still really important, especially from authoritative websites. But I've seen a lot of cases where the types of links that used to work years ago really don't have much impact in today's algorithms. So I think we need to really be focusing on whether our content does a good job at meeting the quality questions that Google gives us, and a little bit less emphasis on link building in a lot of cases.
Yeah,
Brian?
First disagreement of the day, Marie.
Tell me.
The reason
I do know that links are important. Don't get me wrong.
Of course,
no,
yeah. It's not a hard. It's just like a slight disagreement. Because I think that they've sort of, from what I've seen from the last call, assuming the trend continues from Google, my opinion is they're really worried about inaccurate, dangerous, shady AI written content in the search results. In terms of semantically matching results, I feel like, of course, they haven't maxed it out. There's always room for improvement, but it's really good. And if you use Google Voice Search on the Google app, it's scary good. But their main concern right now, they're not going to take a risk and just flip flop out and take links from like whatever it is. Let's say like an importance of like an 8 out of 10 to like a 5. I think what they want to do is sort of hold serve now. They own the whole market, because if you take a step back, they own the market with search. People love Google. People use Google. It's great. Like there's not a lot of like, the ceiling is, they're pretty much there. Like I'm sure there's more stuff they could do, but it's really good. Their main criteria now is to make sure that people are seeing accurate, good, helpful info. And over time, links have been a great indicator to do that. And we've always, since I started Backlinko in 2013, I've heard that links are going to become less and less important in 2 years, less and less important in 3 years. It never really happened. So that was 10 years ago. So I think they'll probably be, of course, they're not becoming more important, and they're probably not becoming this. They're not going to be the same level of importance. So they're going to decline a little bit. I agree with Marie in that sense, but I don't think it's going to be, I think they'll be more or less the same importance as they are 5 years from now, as they are now, just because it's a great signal for Google to sort of filter out bad sites, identify authority. It's just a great signal. And the other stuff is messier in terms of user experience and things like that. Because one example I always give is like, say you're looking for like natural ways to cure cancer, and you go on, you land on, there's a page that ranks number 1. You click on it, and it says all you need to do is like stand on your head 5 times a day, and you'll be cured. The time on page bounce rate would be really low on that page because people are going to be reading it, trying it. They're going to think this is great. But it's obviously not true. So Google's they can't use those user experience signals that much because people will just believe what's on Google. They're not necessarily going to go back to search results. And this is really bad. So they kind of have to always default. I'm sure they want to get away from links. I'm sure they've been trying for years to get away from links, but it's like that, that relationship you can't get out of. They're always going back to them because it's just a great signal to filter the wheat from the chaff. In my opinion, Google's main priority now is not really like search intent or semantically understanding your query. I think they nailed that. It's like pretty much 100% good at that. It's really making sure really trusted authoritative sites are ranked on the first page, and links are probably the best way to do that still. And I can't imagine another signal coming along.
One of my favorite things about the black box of SEO is that we can have certified experts in the field just severely disagree from one another.
Oh yeah, I'll never talk. That was a showdown. I'm never talking to Marie again. We're disagreeing on we're disagreeing on percentages of like 5% of.
Oh, absolutely.
Would you agree though, Brian, that some types of links that Google used to value, they're not valuing anymore?
Like, what's an example?
Like, I mean, the obvious example would be the links that worked before Penguin, low quality directory links, things like that, you would really move the needle. And then Penguin came along and Google was good at ignoring those. And then, 2021 link spam update in July, Google came out and said that, hey, if you're guest posting for links, that's against our guidelines. And, we can argue, well, maybe guest posting still works. I don't know. But I really feel like, and from the sites that I've analyzed, there were a lot of sites that heavily used that type of, you've built your own link. It might be confused as a natural mention, that saw big drops. And I don't think they were penalized for those. I really feel like Google shifted their algorithms in those areas to maybe not favor those links as much.
Yeah, 100%. I actually agree with you 100% there. I think they're really just filtering, unless you're doing something really egregious, it's more or less filtering out those types of links that you built. And then you drop and you're like, I got hit by an update, but it's really just you're, on stilts and they pull the stilts out from under you. That's more or less what happened. But in a way that makes every link you do build legitimately more valuable, because it makes links almost more valuable because it's harder to just build a bunch of stuff. If you get a really good solid link, that's worth way more because the other stuff doesn't even work anymore. So that's why I'm saying links are still, like, for me, I don't think they're really going to be that much less important. Of course, they'll be a little less important in 5 years because they'll do all sorts of other signals that they're able to refine. But I think we're talking like 5% less important than they are, not like 50. 5 years is a long time, who knows? But I agree with you, Marie, that anytime you're relying on a type of link, you're probably in trouble, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. And if you're building links with your desired anchor text, your desired page, that's usually not going to bode well over the long term either. So when I say links, I'm talking about the legitimate links. A little guest posting is not going to hurt you, I don't think. But yeah, if you're doing it at scale, it will. But yeah, that's my counter to that. Sort of, when you build a good link, it makes that much more valuable because the other ones don't really work. So like you said, they don't work anymore.
It's interesting. That is quite contrary to what Bernard and Eli were saying earlier today. And Eli even mentioned that he goes head to head with you on this topic. And so yeah, I could go down that rabbit hole for the next 30 minutes, but we'll switch gears a little bit and get tactical here. So let's just suppose that an attendee's website completely tanks after a major core update. What's the order of operations? What do they do first? How do they diagnose the issue and plan a path forward? Marie, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So first thing is just to look at whether you've made any changes yourself. I've seen many cases where it just happened coincidentally that Google ran an update on the same day that we decided to do a site redesign. And then it can be very difficult to know whether it was the changes you made or what Google changed in their algorithms. And so if you've made significant changes to your site, that's where you want to look. But if you're affected by a Google update, like a core update or product reviews, in most cases, you're going to see that your decline in traffic and rankings happens pretty much the day that the update rolls out. We've had a little bit of confusion where some of these updates, they've had like a burst of activity on the last day of the update rolling out. But pretty much if you see like a massive drop in rankings and traffic that lines up with a day that Google ran an update, then you can assume that the update was because of the change in Google's algorithms. Now, the next question is how to fix that. And it's become really, really hard to, there's no straight answer to that. In my experience, it's rarely a technical issue if you were impacted by a core update. Technical issues that impact like Google's ability to crawl or render a page can certainly impact rankings. But with a core update, it's all about content. And again, this blog post that I always harp on about Google on what site owners need to know about core updates, they tell us there's two things we need to focus on. One is content and the other is EAT. And so usually with a core update, we can find, and lately it's been more content, more how well does this page answer the searcher's needs than EAT. But both of those are important.
Nothing to add there. She knows about this 10 times more than I do.
Cool. Well, then, Brian, I'll ask you about this new trend that we're seeing around short form video, the TikTokification of the internet, as we are seeing. Now we're seeing TikTok results showing up in SERPs. YouTube Shorts are now getting prioritized. Where is this going? How do we think about video's role in SEO over the next 18 months?
I can see it being a semi-big part of it. Not over 18 months. I would say it's more of a longer term thing, because the thing about these short form videos is the vast majority are for entertainment. Very few are for practical use. And Google has dipped their toes into this before. Not a lot of people remember because they kind of stopped doing it. They do it still a little bit, but they had video featured snippets for a long time. They still do, but they were more prominent in the past. And I think they sort of discovered it's really hard to match search intent to a video. And what they would basically do is if you were like, oh, how to peel garlic, they would take a video about how to peel garlic, but they would take the section that they thought was most relevant to the search and pull that out. And instead of hitting play on the video, instead of starting at 0 seconds, it would start at 15. When the person got through their whole spiel about blah, 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 it would get right to the peeling of garlic. More or less a TikTok length video that they're trying to pull out of YouTube. They never said anything about it. It sort of came and went. It still exists when you search for certain keywords. But when I saw it at first, I was like, this is going to be a game changer because videos can be really good for certain searches, but there's a lot of fluff around it. Usually there's a lot of like, hey, I'm Brian Dean and blah, blah, blah. People just want, like, for certain things, just want the thing. So in a way, TikTok style videos are perfect for that because they're short. There's no intro. They're to the point. And sometimes they just jump into the middle of something that's already happening, which is in some ways perfect. But I don't think like it's going to be that huge just because, first of all, TikTok is, like I said, the videos are 99% entertainment. So even though Google is amazing at building their own algorithm, they're going to have to build an algorithm on top of theirs just for TikTok and YouTube Shorts to pull out those 0.01% of videos that are entertainment and that are useful, and then match those to the query. And then of that group, find the best one. Are they really going to do that? Like, I don't know. They already, like you said, they already are sort of like testing this sort of out. But I just think for most queries, people want text based content, or they'll just go to YouTube or go to TikTok. People want text for the most part in their Google search results, and they've pushed YouTube and they've have YouTube results, of course, in a lot of SERPs, but less than I thought. And if you look at, like, this is another 10-year ago thing. If it was like 10 years ago, video was going to dominate the SERPs. Like, you just need to, if you didn't have videos and the Yoast video SEO plugin on your site, which doesn't even exist, that shows you how anymore. That shows you how, like, it's not important. If you didn't have that, like, you were going to be irrelevant in the SERPs. 10 years later, there's still about the same amount of videos as there was then, even though the number of videos has exploded and their ability to understand videos has exploded. So for me, I think it'll be part of it because like I mentioned, it has utility. If you can find that video that just jumps right into your problem and answers it in 20 seconds, it's perfect. I think it's going to be tricky to find among the sea of just entertainment videos.
Take definitely not something you hear often. We're seeing like a lot of talk around how this is the next. There's a lot of buzz around this, and so that's a sobering perspective. Marie, how do you feel about it?
I think we need to pay close attention to video. And the reason why I say it is because last year at Google's Search On event, and that's where they announced, here's the big things that we have coming up. They talked a lot about MUM, M-U-M, this natural language processing framework that's more powerful than BERT when BERT first came out. And one of the things that they really focused on was how MUM was really good at identifying entities in videos, even if it wasn't mentioned, and they showed a video that was all this stuff about a penguin doing all these different things. And they said MUM could identify that this video was about the life story of a penguin, even though those words weren't mentioned in the video. And since then, we've seen, like Brian said, Google show us search results where they can jump right to the answer in the video. I think, and then Search On event this year, Google announced all these changes. A lot of them were related to shopping, but changes in the search results that I think we're going to start seeing more people stuck in the search results than going to websites. And one of the things that Google's probably going to try to do is to get more people on video, especially in regards to product reviews. There's been so much information, all these product reviews updates that Google has coming out. One of the ways that you could thoroughly demonstrate firsthand expertise is by actually videoing yourself reviewing products. And I think that that's something that Google is going to start to reward more, because I see it in the chat here that people are saying, the younger generation some of them don't even use Google. Like my kids, if they want a recipe, they go straight to TikTok, and they're going to be adults soon. So Google knows they need to adapt to that, and they'll be playing around with it for quite a while, I'm sure.
Brian, rebuttal to this?
Well, I think we'll just have to see. I'm always skeptical about like when Google announces at these events, because we've seen tons of things they've announced. Stadia just got like closed yesterday, and how many they had all conferences just for that. AMP was like the next big thing for mobile, and that's getting depreciated. My issue, I agree with Marie, they're gonna want to do these things. My reluctance is, can they do it? And I wouldn't discount Google because they can do amazing stuff with their technology, don't get me wrong, but I've just seen this sort of, I could call it a hype cycle, but like, and I make videos, like I know the space. I think there's potential in it on the platform you're on. Like, they haven't done a good job of like incorporating that into the search results. And short form may change the game because it's kind of perfect in a way for searches, because it's a short answer and it jumps right in, as opposed to a long YouTube video. It's easier for them. The other challenge is, I think if they're going to do short form, it's going to be less of TikTok and more YouTube Shorts, because they're not going to build a whole algorithm around another platform like TikTok. It just doesn't make any sense. They've been able to like they had a pipeline to Twitter that they lost. So they're not going to make that mistake again, in my opinion. But they have YouTube Shorts. It's still really small compared to TikTok. And then basically TikTok reposts right now. Same with Instagram Reels. So I don't know. My take is, I think it'll be a thing. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying video is going to be less important, but I'm always more of like the old school. Like, I've just seen this like sort of revolution in the search results so many times. And if you look at the results from like the year 2005 to now, they're basically the same. Like, there's some ads in the top. There's a bunch of blue links that you click on. There's some features. And now there's more stuff. Obviously, there's featured snippets. Like Marie said, if this is a way to keep people on the search results, it'll incentivize them obviously to do it more. And there's more bells and whistles, but like, it's basically the same. You type in your thing that you want to search for, you get a bunch of results, you pick one, you click on it. If you don't like it, you go back to the results. I think in 10 years, this is pretty much what Google is going to be.
We're going to rapid fire for the remaining next five-ish minutes. So we'll try to keep it punchy. Short form, as Google is trying to learn. First, right off the bat, we'll go with something high level here. For an audience question: how do you create content that withstands any of these major Google updates? How do you future-proof your content?
Go ahead, Marie. I think you do.
I was going to let you go first.
Okay.
I mean.
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
Marie,
you go. No, you go.
No,
Brian.
please.
Go.
Okay, so
content creation expert. You're the guy.
We could do this for 15 minutes. We'll just do the rest of the session just trading off. So the number one thing, I think it's more or less what Marie had really harped on in the beginning. It's that unique perspective. It doesn't completely protect you from an update. There's nothing you can do that's like, oh yeah, I can just sleep at night. No, I will never get hit by any update ever. It's always possible, but it's extremely unlikely if you're writing helpful, original content that has unique perspective from experts. If you do that, it's going to be really hard to get hit by an update. Google won't want to hit you an update because you're providing what they want. They want really good quality content that raises the bar, because that makes their search engine better. It makes people go to Google. So kind of if you give Google what it wants at the end of the day, usually they'll give you what you want, which is traffic.
That's good. I think that, I mean, I totally agree with Brian. I think that the question is not possible. I don't think that we can make content that withstands any Google update. And the reason why I'm saying this is often Google will they'll change their understanding of intent. So say you had like the best informational article on a particular product, and Google decides that most people who are searching for that product just want a transactional page. They just want to buy the product. You can write the best article ever, and you're not going to rank in a transactional spot. So in some cases, Google updates can be devastating because they've decided that user intent is different. But I think if I wanted to write content that has the best chance of withstanding Google updates, what I'm going to do is Number one, focus on the user, which sounds like kind of a corny thing to say, but this is a trend that I've seen amongst when we look at pages that lost and won with core updates, is that the pages that win are the ones that quickly get the user to their answer. If you think of how we search, you're on your phone, you don't want to read a 4,000 word article on this topic you just searched for. The vast majority of the time you want to scroll and go, here's what I was looking for, and either read that or move on. So number one is finding that. And then number two is to always be keeping an eye on what it is that Google promoted. So if you notice that you've lost rankings, then start looking at the content that popped up ahead of you. And what I find is hard for people is to look at that without saying, oh, well, Google screwed up here. There's always a reason, and it might be a combination of things, but there's always a reason why whatever is ranking better is better for searchers. And so if you're writing always with your users in mind, then that's your best chance of producing good content, as opposed to just chasing what certain tools might say or chasing metrics. I think having the content that actual searchers want is by far the best thing we can do.
We help Google's algorithm rank using any sort of Google Ads or paid social, or are those signals outside of the organic rankings?
Paid is Google's vehemently said that there's no connection between paid ads and organic search. I know people all the time will say, well, I stopped spending money on AdWords or on ads and now my organic rankings dropped. Social, I think, is the same way. However, content that tends to do well on social is the same type of content that does well on organic, because people like it. But I think that any correlations you can find there are more just correlations, rather than, it's not that, oh, you went viral on Facebook, therefore you're going to be ranking better, unless going viral on Facebook brought attention to get you more, better authoritative links. That's a possibility there.
Brian?
Yeah, I agree 100% with Marie. They're totally separate. And I mean, not only has Google said it, I always take what they say with a little bit of a grain of salt, but in this case, it just makes logical sense. Like, it would be close to a scandal if it was discovered that there was some sort of connection between having AdWords account, using Google Ads, and your rankings in search results. Take that out of the equation, which is true. It would make the search results worse. Like, they want to have people go to Google, but when it's same thing with YouTube. A lot of people are like, oh, if you run YouTube ads, does it help no, it doesn't help your videos do well in organic, because they just want great videos on the platform that you want to watch because you'll stay there. If they start adding all this artificial stuff in the short term, I'm sure it'll give them a little bit of a boost. If Google announced tomorrow, anyone who's running Google ads get their rankings move up one spot, they'd probably have record-breaking amounts of people entering their credit cards into Google ads. But over the long term, it would hurt them, because it doesn't make their results any better. It makes it actually objectively worse. So yeah, there's no connection there. And in terms of paid social, like Marie said, the only way that can help you is if it leads to links, and it rarely does, because only a few people, if you look at the whole world, can add a link to your site. The vast majority of people, like my mom, she goes on Facebook, she posts about politics, she texts me, she goes to the local news website on her phone, she plays Candy Crush. She doesn't have a website. She has no way to link to me. Even if she saw my content, this is the best thing I've ever read in my life, she can't link to me. So with paid social, a lot of times just getting in front of normal people who don't have websites, who can't link to you, or don't work at a website that can link to you. So paid social, in my opinion, is good if that alone is your goal, to get branding, to get people to come to your site, to get conversions. But in terms of like getting links from it, it's so rare, and I've tested it a million times, because I'm like, oh, you can just pay money and get links, and it's white hat. That's the goal. That's the holy grail. But it very rarely works, because it's hard to get in front of these people. I call them link creators. Link creators are like people that can create links. They're a small segment of the population, and that's why you usually need to do outreach to get links, because you identify those link creators and you email them directly and basically ask for a link. There are other ways to get links passively from link creators, but it's not usually from any sort of social media thing, because it's hard to target those folks.
Got that. Yeah, the big takeaway in the chat was that your mom plays Candy Crush. That was a very, very, very popular
She's
insight.
like, she like still plays it like it's 2010. I think she's keeping it afloat.
I love it. I love it. Next year she'll be on Flappy Bird. Very cool. Well, thank you both so much for spending your time with us today. Definitely want to give you each the floor to tell the people what you have going on and how they can get in touch. Marie, certainly share with us a little bit about how people can learn more.
For sure. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to do this. I always love babbling on about what I think Google is doing. If you want to reach out to me, you can do so at help@mariehaynes.com. And you can go to my website and find I have a podcast that I do every 2 weeks where I babble on about what I think Google is doing and how we can take advantage of it as site owners. And I also have a book on the Quality Raters Guidelines that many websites use, or many site owners use as a checklist to assess your website in the eyes of Google. You can find that at mariehaynes.com/book. And one final thing I'll just add, I'm recently starting to add strategy sessions where you can book an hour with me to discuss your website and talk about the latest Google algorithm updates and changes, and we'll talk together about how to make improvements.
Insanely valuable. Thank you very much, Marie. Brian?
Well, first I want to say that thanks for having me. Thanks for chatting with me, Marie. Anyone who's serious about, protecting themselves from Google updates and being prepared from Google updates should book that session with Marie, because I've been in the game for a long time. Marie's the best. And I can almost guarantee that you'll get your money's worth from that session, because you can at least feel protected and know that you're doing whatever you can to prevent yourself from getting hit from an update, and probably just improving your site in general, because Marie has a lot of good insights on just how to create a really helpful website.
Thank you.
Yeah, in terms of where to find me, at Brian E. Dean with an E on Twitter. My company Backlinko got bought by SEMrush, so I'm always putting out courses on the SEMrush Academy, so I recommend checking that out. And my startup Exploding Topics is a great place to discover trends before they take off. So check out explodingtopics.com and sign up for our newsletter. We have about 100,000 people that get our trends every week on that.
Fantastic. Thank you both tremendously. As y'all can tell, we only have A+ players on stage at the summit this year, and Brian and Marie are no exception. Thank you both very, very much for your time